Oh, it's Wednesday. There we go. I'm definitely unmuted now. It's Wednesday. It's uncovered. He's Ron. I'm Anthony. And welcome to another episode where we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream media. Ron, have you had a good week? I know you've been at the White House, just, small things, no big deal. What happened?
I had to go up there and, give Biden a little advice, get him pointed in the right direction,
Yeah.
give him his talking points for the year.
On a little note card, hopefully.
No, they were, it was a great experience because it's just so great to go in there and see how passionate they are about, first of all, how diverse this White House is,
Right.
walking around this. I'm talking about in the office building, seeing the staff, incredibly diverse, people who care passionately about making other people's lives better. I got to hear about what the agenda would be for next year and all the things that they want to do, and it's just one policy thing after another. So different from being in meetings like that with this White House than with Republicans, who aren't sitting there thinking about, how can we lower prescription drug costs.
They're not thinking about any policy, really. They're just trying to shut down Dem policy or policy that has gone before. We'll come to that. I also we'll do some reaction to the infamous Katie Britt address, her response to the State of the Union. A lot of people have been messaging me saying, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about that. So that's something to look forward to. I'm not sure if I should play the clip of her or the clip of Scarlett Johansson doing it on Saturday Night Live. I'm not sure which I preferred more. They were both pretty amazing. Talking of State of the Union, let's talk a little bit about the kind of scenario that Donald Trump has got himself into. Just explain to us a little bit about this story that has kind of come off the back of it, really. And this is with Laken Riley. Just explain about that first.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing is it's so sad. It's so disheartening. Sometimes these are really the moments when my job is tracking right-wing media, social media can really bum you out is things like this, because I knew going into 2024 what their playbook was going to be. And this whole campaign for the Republicans is about the border and migrants. And their playbook is obvious and simple. They are looking for every crime in the United States committed by a migrant, every robbery, every murder, every rape. And we have 8 million migrants in the US right now, most of whom were here before Joe Biden was president, who commit crimes just like anybody else, just like anybody around the world. So you can always find, out of 8 million people, someone who committed a crime that day. And that's what they're doing. They find one and they magnify it. Today, it's a Guatemalan in Florida who committed a crime they're blowing up. So every single day, this is their playbook. And we saw in the State of the Union address that they have decided to exploit this Laken Riley murder, who is a Venezuelan migrant, because this happened in a Democratic stronghold in a swing state. So it's just all the elements, or it's just like a perfect storm for them. It's what they've been waiting for. And so to watch how they have exploited this terrible thing and this family has just been horrible. So let me first of all set this up with a few facts. First of all, Donald Trump, on his last day in office, granted a special exception to keep Venezuelan migrants from being deported. And he did that as payback to the Venezuelan American community in South Florida who voted for him in big numbers.
Right.
And this was part of his payback, was this executive order. So this gentleman did not come in under that, but came in right after, because what happened was that executive order, which stayed any deportations of Venezuelans for, I think it was 6 months, encouraged other Venezuelans to immediately try and come into the United States. So it really that executive order led to a surge of Venezuelan migrants to come in during Biden's first year. And this person was one of those people. So we start there. Then you have the second point, which is, this tragic murder, and they go in, and Mike Collins, who's a congressman from Georgia, not for Athens, but a congressman from Georgia, invites the family to attend the State of the Union address literally like 3 or 4 days after this woman was murdered.
Yeah.
He's inviting them to be exploited on national television for his own political purposes. They refuse because they're in no state to go to DC for that event. But then what happens is a few days later, Trump holds a rally in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district in Northwest Georgia. And clearly the Trump campaign and the Trump people have been working overtime behind the scenes to get this family on board their campaign. So what happens? They have them posing backstage. This is just a sickening situation and a sickening photo. There it is. This is her family. The Trump campaign blows up this photo of her, say her name, and Donald Trump signs it, "I love you, Laken." And they're standing there grinning for a campaign photo exploiting this young nursing student's death. And by the way, he signed Laken Riley's name incorrectly. He misspelled the name. So that's what happened.
Do you think he even realized that she was dead? Because, I get the feeling that he didn't have a clue, or if, we obviously talk about his narcissistic personality disorder, but to grin like that for that photograph suggests to me that either he doesn't know that she is a victim, or he is so detached from reality that he makes it all about him.
I think he's grinning knowing that this is winning him votes in Georgia.
Oh, man, Ron, I can't believe. I mean, I appreciate that is probably the case.
Yeah.
But the fact that a human on this planet could do that,
this is a great moment for him because he figures, I just won Georgia. This is what he's thinking. It's terrible.
It's terrible.
And there'll be another one next week.
Explain about Lauren Boebert and how this is connected.
Well, it's more connected to Katie Britt. That's probably who you meant. Lauren Boebert is next. But yeah, I mean, Katie Britt did the same thing in her response to the State of the Union. She shows another migrant story. This poor girl was sex trafficked because of Joe Biden, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's the same playbook. This is their playbook. They're going to constantly single out migrants, except, rather than choose one of the 8 million, the 8 million migrants who are already here who have committed a crime in the United States, she decides to pick a story that she heard on one of her border photo ops, that it had occurred, what was it, 8-10 years before Joe Biden even took office. And it happened in Mexico. It had absolutely nothing to do with the United States or Joe Biden. So this is the problem. I monitor these guys. It's like they put these things out and they blame it on Biden. And then we literally have to spend hours and hours and days digging, who is this person? When did they come in the country? Who was president then? Why weren't they deported? Why were they released? And by the way, the guy who murdered Laken Riley, he was released from a detention facility because we didn't have bed space, which is exactly what the border funding bill was supposed to prevent. Because we're having to release all these people because we don't have bed space. Trump was doing it too.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of the propaganda about this migrant crisis, as they call it, these isolated stories that they are blowing up, and in the case of the Katie Britt one, as you say, it was a decade or so ago, is because actually the border is far more secure than they claim, and that the efforts at the border are just as secure now as they were under Donald Trump. The only difference with Donald Trump is that he had a no asylum rule. He just wasn't letting people in. Whereas now, obviously, they have to. You can't close the United States to asylum seekers. It's just insane.
Well, because
of compassion and humanity, and also the UN, and there are kind of international rules about how we conduct ourselves. So is that the reason why they have to find these stories? Because actually there are no current stories to tell.
I worked on an article this whole week, which is going to be out tomorrow, called Donald Trump's Big Lie, New Big Lie. that he had the most secure border in U.S. history,
Yeah.
where I lay out in his own words when he was president and with numbers showing it was not. It was not. He was releasing. It's a complete myth that, you know, he was turning away all the people who presented at the border. This is a lie. And I proved this in the article with numbers, cold hard numbers. You're correct. The border is just as secure. The only difference is more people are presenting at the border.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, a number of reasons and a number of factors, because there was a huge migrant surge in 2019 when Trump was president. And Trump was forced to release, people don't know this, over 1.1 million migrants into the U.S. in 2019 alone. Into the U.S. This is Trump. The reason is, yes, we have asylum laws. It's the law of the land. You can't do what Stephen Miller says and what Trump is saying now and just turn everybody away, because judges have already ruled that a president and DHS cannot do this.
Yeah.
So you'd have to repeal the asylum law to be able to do what Trump wants to do.
Also, we should remind people that the wall was, again, propaganda. He didn't build much of it, and the wall that he did build, people on the southern side of the border worked out how to climb over it pretty damn quickly. So it wasn't the deterrent, and it became the song, you know, "Build the Wall," became more of just a propaganda process to kind of get a rally crowd riled up. But in reality, it wasn't much of a defense.
Let me build on that. Trump diverted $16 million out of the immigration court system to build the wall. Okay, to use the bill. The wall did nothing whatsoever to stop migrants coming in. Nothing. But that $16 million that was taken out of the immigration courts, who are already backlogged. We already had you can't deport somebody until they have their court hearing. We deport people after they have asylum hearings. The problem is it takes 2 to 3 years to get an asylum hearing because the courts don't have the funding. Trump only made it worse by diverting money away from and you know what? Mike Johnson, the bill he just passed, cut funding for the immigration courts even more, which is going to backlog the lag. So if you're a Republican and you're a hardliner on the border and you want more people deported, the last thing you want to do is take money out of immigration courts, because they're the ones who order the deportations. It's just madness what is happening right now. But the American people they really don't get it. They really don't understand immigration policy or the border. Look, it took me months of reading and studying experts and stuff before I even have a basic understanding of it now. I don't consider myself an expert, but I have a basic understanding. But the number of Americans who really understand what's happening at the border and immigration policy is probably, you know, a couple of hundred people.
But are the Democrats doing enough to redirect the conversation? Because you know, if you're writing an article about what really happened, you know, they need to be using that as a point of reference and saying, these are the numbers. Trump's lying. We're just as secure now as we ever were. Trump is preventing funding the court system, which is going to speed up, you know, the processes. I mean, we need to hear that, don't we? And you know, I watched Hakeem Jeffries' press conference this morning live. And, you know, I like this guy. You know, he's a good guy. But I wasn't hearing the specifics. I was hearing lots of general language, but I wasn't hearing the specifics, the facts, the numbers. It's important to let the press know that actually this whole migrant border crisis is bullshit.
It's, you know, just say this, you know, this is a fact. When Biden took office, there were around 8 million migrants already in the U.S. About 3 million of them had pending asylum claims. The other 5 million are just milling around. They have no papers, no documentation, no pending citizenship claims, no pending asylum claims. They're just here. And those 5 million people were here before Biden took office. Okay. So those are things that the American public needs to know. I talked about the migrant surge in 2019. Well, those numbers came down. They were cut in half, almost in half, to about 600,000 in 2020. Why? Because of COVID. I mean, people weren't coming to the border and moving from country to country because of COVID. So Trump got a break on his numbers. But what happened when those countries reopened in 2021? He basically had 2 years worth of migration stored up, and they bum rushed the border,
right.
Basically because they couldn't come in 20. So this is the reality of what's actually happening. And the countries they were coming from, their economies were wrecked by COVID. So that contributed.
But that's such an important point, isn't it? And that's a point that's very easy for Democrats to communicate. That, the reason that numbers were down during Donald Trump's presidency were not because his border was more secure, but because COVID shut down the whole planet and no one was going anywhere.
Yeah. It wasn't secure at all before 20. He had a good year in 20 because of COVID. Correct.
Interesting. Okay, let's take a look at this clip. I've made people wait long enough for this clip of Senator Katie Britt. We'll talk about it afterwards, but here's 19 seconds of pure magic.
When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12.
Yeah. So one independent journalist did an expose on that story, and he is now doing the rounds of the media explaining how he managed to kind of unearth the truth. It wasn't just the performative aspect of her presentation, the faux emotion and trying to give the impression that this was, life or death for all Republicans. But it was the fact that she was using, in this case, somebody's case from years ago that was completely irrelevant to this moment in time. It's, as you said earlier, it's just a Republican ploy to tug on the heartstrings, but also to instill fear in voters. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen if it's not true.
Yeah, they have no, they're trying to claim that they have some sympathy for these victims. They could care less.
They don't care. Yeah.
They don't care. They're just using these incidents. So, and for her to grab this incident that had nothing to do with Joe Biden or the United States for that matter, because it happened in Mexico, is just repulsive. Here's the thing, when you talk about independent journalists. So this is the problem, is that you got guys like me and guys like him that see these migrant stories that are being posted all over social media. Migrant did this, migrant did that, this happened. Like I said, we're having to hunt these things down. When did this person enter the country? Who was president? Where did they come from? What were because here's the other thing. The asylum rules are different for a single person from Mexico versus someone who shows up at the border with a child. Yeah. The rules are different for people from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Ukraine. Every country in the world, we have different asylum laws for that country. And those asylum laws can change if they're a family unit or single, or what their age is, or the medical situation, or criminal history. It's a Byzantine system. So you got these solo people like me and like that journalist trying to debunk these stories when, there should mainstream media that has much more resources than us should be the one calling Katie Britt out on things like this, or Donald Trump out on the Lake and Riley thing, but they're not. What are they doing?
And that's when we talk about the failure of the mainstream media, the failure to meet the moment right now. With America slipping into authoritarianism, now is the time to be journalists. And there is this chasm where people are not stepping up. And, thank goodness for YouTube, and thank goodness for Midas Touch and for independent journalism. Because, there is, we're flat out doing this stuff. And this is what's so important that people realize, is that, as you say, the resources of the mainstream media are being wasted as they continue to play a two-horse race. And this template for covering an election that the mainstream media are using is antiquated, and it doesn't meet the moment.
Yeah. And this is why I try to promote independent journalists as much as possible. And and put their stories out and retweet their accounts, which may be very small. Because you know what? The mainstream journalists, they don't do that for us, for small outlets. They don't retweet our stories.
Yeah.
They'll take my raw material, they'll take my clips
and reuse it.
And they'll use it for their stories, and they'll send me their story. New York Times reporters, Washington Post reporters, AP reporters, they send me their stories all the time. Hey, Ron, tweet this for me. But do you think that you think an AP reporter will tweet a Midas Touch story? Hell no. They don't do that, because there's a snobbishness involved there too. They need to get past all that stuff. We've got a job to do here.
Well, there's a name for it. It's the media elite. And we've used that phrase for years, and I think people only now are really starting to know what it means. And for those of us who've left the mainstream media, as you know, I work for the network, so you know, stepping away from that, you really realize quite how shackled you are in those institutions. I want to ask you your thoughts, just going back to Katie Britt's response. Do you think that the fact that it was so bad and so inappropriate, and even Republicans have criticized her, do you think it just the coverage upstaged the grand effort of Joe Biden's speech? Because I seem to see more clips of Katie Britt and of Scarlett Johansson's version on SNL than I did of Joe Biden. So do you think from that perspective it actually was quite effective?
I hadn't thought about that. That's a very good point. Because normally most people don't pay much attention to those responses, you know, and the viewership drops precipitously from the State of the Union to the response. But the next day that probably got more coverage than Biden's speech. You're right. So, but in a negative way, you know, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about it, but I will. I'll say this though, you know, Katie Britt was rumored to be, many people thought she was going to be Donald Trump's running mate. Of course, I've predicted otherwise, but many people thought she was the front runner on his short list. And I gotta believe that she just blew it with that performance. I really do. I think if she was on the short list, she's off it now.
I mean, it was one of the weirdest things I've ever watched. You know, I watched it live, and I was like, "Is this a pastiche?" Like, it just didn't make any sense. I was trying to kind of work out what it is, and you know, I presume she was live, but obviously people get very nervous when they're not used to doing public speaking, and especially, you know, a live broadcast like that. And so maybe she just overcooked it because she wasn't really able to, you know, make sense of where she was at. It's very hard, you know, to do these types of things. Okay, let's talk about Ken Buck. I'm going to move it on because we've got so much to get through. Because this is the Republican congressman who, in a bit of a surprise announcement, he was going to be leaving in November, right? But now he's decided to speed it up, and he wants to get out straight away. And issued a statement about this. And I'll just show the statement. You can explain to us why he's decided to go now rather than in November.
Yeah, well, this came as a big surprise. I mean, Ken Buck has been on the outs for a while. I mean, he was a classic right-wing conservative, Freedom Caucus member, all that, but he clearly doesn't like Trump, doesn't like what Trump is all about. And, you know, he had a bumpy ride here these last few years in Congress, not going along with everything Trump. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's still very right-wing, but he votes with the Democrats on some key things.
Right. He's not in the cult, is what you're saying.
He's not a cultist by any means. So yes, he announced that he was leaving at the end of the year, which was somewhat a surprise because he's in one of the safest seats in the world, which is, you know, Eastern Colorado. It's overwhelmingly Republican, which is why Boebert, you know, wants to move into that district because she's currently in like a more where it's R+7. She's going to like an R+20. And if she knows if she wins that seat, she's going to be like Green, where she's going to be set for life. She'll never be moved out of that seat if she wins it. So, you know, I think Buck's plan was to leave at the end of the year, but then Buck did not anticipate that Boebert was going to try and move into his district. So I think that he doesn't like Boebert. I think he understood that this was going to be a problem. He did not want Boebert to win his seat and succeed him. And so he timed this in such a way to really put Boebert in a hell of a bind, because and by the way, he didn't even tell Mike Johnson. He said he left him a voicemail 30 minutes before he announced it, which is pretty funny, So why does this put Boebert in a bind? Because now there's a special election, that has to be held to fill this seat until the end of the year. Jared Polis is a Democrat, the governor. He decides the special election date. And what did he do? He put the special election on the same day as the Republican primary for this year. So you have this crazy scenario playing out right now, and Boebert is just raging about it today. Speaking of independent journalists, a good one in Colorado, Chris Perez wrote a really good story you can read on Twitter today about Boebert's reaction to this, because for her to run in the special election, she would have to resign right now. This is why this puts her in a bind. She would have to leave her seat and resign from Congress basically today to be able to run in that special election. She doesn't want to do that. So that means she has to not run in the special election to keep her current seat. So that means somebody else is guaranteed to win the special election and to be in that seat until the end of the year. So she may win the Republican nomination in theory, but she won't be able to serve. Somebody else will be in that seat until the end of the year. That's number one. But number two, by them putting the election on the same day, you're going to have the special election ballot, which is going to be first. Then you're going to have the Republican primary, which is going to be next. So basically what's going to happen is she is not on the first ballot. So her name is, so somebody is going to have to vote for somebody besides Lauren Boebert in the first section.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go down. Most likely they're going to vote for the same person on the second ballot that they did on the first. So she fully understands what's going on here. She thinks that Ken Buck did this intentionally to screw her, which he probably did. And this is even though she's got a lot more money than these other guys, it's going to put her in a hell of a bind.
I was really hoping that come November we'd see the end of Lauren Boebert. I just what she brings to U.S. politics. How she kind of drags it down. This kind of lack of any humanity, any intellect, any vocabulary, any kindness. It's so dark, and there is a handful of individuals, Marjorie Taylor Greene's another one who you mentioned, that if they just weren't there, I really do feel like we would be able to just get back on with the business of government. But these people don't care for the rules or the protocols. They're happy to shout out during the State of the Union speech and just break with all convention. And it's not good because, meanwhile, Russia is looking to the US and seeing this catastrophe, and they're loving it. They're loving people like, the disruptors. They love them. I have a clip of Ken Buck from, I think NBC grabbed this. And actually, this is a really very interesting few seconds. And I really hope that the Democrats kind of repurpose this video. Here it is.
This place just keeps going downhill, and I don't need to spend my time here. We've taken impeachment and we've made it a social media issue as opposed to a constitutional concept. Mike Johnson's ability to talk me into staying here is going to be about as successful as his ability into talking me into unconstitutional impeachments.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's very rare, isn't it? I mean, you really do need to be on the way out to be able to speak so freely, don't you?
Yeah. It was bad under McCarthy. It's much worse under Johnson because he has no leadership skills. And I think McCarthy, on occasion would go against Trump. Rarely, but sometimes on important things he would.
Yes.
And that's why they got rid of him. And Mike Johnson won't. So you just have this completely toxic environment in a situation where, the crazies are running the place. And here's the other thing that Ken Buck and all these other Republicans know who are leaving. I think we're up to like 30 Republicans leaving now at the end of the year.
Yeah.
They know that they're going to be in the minority next year. They're not going to hold the majority in the House. And that's not going to be very much fun for them when not only is it toxic, because the people that are leaving are the normal people, the normies, the good people. I mean, good, quote unquote, not all of them, but for the most part, the non-MAGA people are the ones leaving the house, and they are most likely going to be replaced by more crazy people like Boebert and Green. So they know, people like Ken Buck know that this situation, they're going to be in the minority next year, so they're not going to be running any committees, and there's going to be more crazy people in the Republican side than there are right now.
Do you know, I had a feeling straight after the State of the Union, and I'm sure you felt the same, that I describe it as like the Biden bounce. There was this moment where, because he was so good, and he really, you know, hit the mark with that speech, and ignoring the Republican response for just a moment, a few things happened in the few days after the State of the Union where it was almost like the Republican House of Cards was really starting to fall. And I recognized, certainly with Republicans criticizing Katie Britt, that obviously helped. And I saw a glimmer of hope, because of course the polls are still not good. And there was another poll out today that put Donald Trump ahead on the national stage. We ignore the polls, but they're still nonetheless something to, you know, give us a point of reference. And I was like, wow, you know, Biden can really do this, can really win this, because he put all of the critics to bed in terms of, you know, in fact, Republicans were saying that he was on something because he was so energized. I mean, that they literally run out of things to say about him being old and senile. So they're now like, oh, well, you know, he must have been on drugs. It's so crazy, isn't it? That really is all they're left with. And when they said that, I was like, yeah, you know, they're just lost, especially without leadership.
You make some really good points there. Donald Trump accused him of being on drugs too, of all people. Yeah. So at the same time, we have this big story, in Rolling Stone, that talks about the fact that, you know, the Trump White House was this huge pill dispensary.
Yeah.
You got the former Trump press secretary coming out and saying Ronnie Jackson is passing out Provigil and Xanax on Air Force One to whoever wanted it. And you got Trump now accusing Joe Biden of being on drugs. I mean, this guy's just shameless. But you know, here's why they're saying that, because look, they've spent the last year, multiple years, clipping, you know, things out of context, deceptive clips, AI clips of Biden, you know, trying to make him look like this doddering old senile fool who can't put two sentences together and can't walk and can't talk and can't tie his shoes and doesn't know where to go. And then, so, you know, that's what the American people see. They might not watch, you know, a Biden press conference. There hadn't been very many. Yeah. They might not watch a Biden interview. So they don't really know. And all they're getting are these little snippets of things that Fox is putting out and Republicans are putting out. And they get in their head, and the Republicans get in their head, that this is what Biden is like, when all of us who follow Biden know that that is not what he's like. And people behind the scenes know that's not what he's like. So when he goes out and he gives a State of the Union like that, not only the speech, but before the speech, he spent a good 20 minutes in the aisles, a good half hour after the speech. Trump was saying that they were going to have to take 2 intermissions during his speech because there was no way he could stand up there that long. That's what Trump said before the speech. So when he disproves that and gives a high energy speech, in fact, I thought it was too high energy and too aggressive, but that clearly was the plan. The plan was to say, look, what you've been saying about him, we're going to show you it's totally wrong. And so what do Republicans have to do? Because they've just been shown to look like fools. Oh, he must be on drugs.
And then there was the timing of Brian Butler and his revelations about what went on at the White House and at Mar-a-Lago. And that was very interesting. I'll play the clip in just a sec. Just set this up for us, because this was another thing that bolstered the House of Cards collapsing for Republicans.
I have said this many times, that the reason why I want these trials to happen is because I understand criminal cases. You know, I've prosecuted and defended over 7,000 serious criminal cases. And what I know is that what you see in the public records is the tip of the iceberg, that there's so much more evidence that that we don't know about. that Jack Smith does know about, that the
Yeah.
FBI knows about. And when all of that comes out, there's no way the American people will vote for this guy. But it's only going to come out if we have trials. And so, but here, this piece, this is one of those million pieces that actually came out early. Why did it come out early? Because it wasn't going to come out early. This guy was not going to come forward. He was an unnamed Trump employee in the indictment, but he came forward because Judge Aileen Cannon, who's in the tank for Trump, has ordered Jack Smith to release the names of the witnesses. And so this guy basically said, well, Cannon was outing me anyway, so I figured I'd get out in front of it and tell my story before they started trashing me. So that's the whole reason why this, but there's tons of stuff like this guy. And this guy was
keep happening, isn't it?
Incredibly damaging.
Between now and November, we're going to hear more of this. There'll be more whistleblowers.
I hope so.
And I get a sense that, you know, any Donald Trump case that Trump is making for himself will collapse in the face of all of these discoveries. Listen to this. It's compelling.
Were there ever any instances when you were still working there that you witnessed where Trump was, in your view, carelessly throwing around national security information?
You know, this really, stood out to me, but in, I believe it was April of 2021, there was a member, Anthony Pratt, who he was coming, he flew in the night before.
He's an Australian billionaire.
He finishes his meeting with the former president, gets in the car, and his chief of staff says, "How did the meeting go?" Pratt, without saying, just says, "He told me," and it would be, U.S. military, classified information of what he told him about Russian submarines and U.S. submarines. And that's really all I remember hearing, and I went, what? I'm thinking this. I'm in the car, I'm like, did I just hear that? So it wasn't like, oh, the meeting went well, we talked about it. He went straight to the point. He told me that the U.S. subs and with the Russian subs and, something that would more than likely, in my mind, be classified.
So it was clear to you that he was basically seeking access to Trump.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, red flags went up in my mind years before that.
So Anthony Pratt, this Australian billionaire that you're talking about, he would pay a lot of money to come and have these New Year's Eve parties.
So it might cost $1,000, $1,500 per person. He was giving $1 million. And I think at the height, he had 30 or 40 people there. So something that would be 50,000, let's just say max 50. Here's a guy that's just buying access. It's very easy to see.
One of many, I'm sure. And it also made me think about, the argument that Trump makes about Joe Biden keeping documents in his residence. And I think I touched on this last time. I mean, Biden's residences were not public places. They didn't throw parties at these places. These were private, an office and a private house with security. Mar-a-Lago is a rentable venue, right? You can rent it even if you're not a member, if you know a member. Do you see what I mean? It's like it has a listing on Yelp where you can look through the pictures, as I have done many times, seeing all the crazy activities going on there. It's just a wedding venue, and that is the real difference, isn't it?
Journalists have said for years that Donald Trump uses his properties to make money from foreign entities to get around the laws that say that political candidates and elected officials cannot accept money from foreign governments. Right. He has always claimed that, no, he doesn't do that. Well, I mean, we can go back to the 90s when the Russians rented entire floors from his buildings in New York with no people in them. They were just paying him huge chunks of money to supposedly rent. Why were they doing that? To rent, office space that was largely vacant. And we saw the same thing with his hotels and resorts and properties around the world.
Yeah, well, Trump Hotel DC.
Yeah, they can't cut a check to him. That's illegal. So they do what this guy does. Okay, yeah, I'll give you $1 million for, 25 tickets to this dinner, and that's what they do. And what is he doing in return? Giving them nuclear secrets. This is treasonous. This story should have been, it was a reasonably well, I don't know how much play this got. This story should be everywhere. It should be on ABC, NBC, CBS, morning, noon, night. This is a major story. I saw it covered on CNN. I saw it covered on MSNBC, social media, and then it kind of fizzled out. It's a one-day story.
But the mainstream networks are desperate for a replay of 2020. They want Trump versus Biden. They want to cover it like a traditional election. And I feel like whenever there's an opportunity to, because they're in their minds, they're doing this kind of both sides journalism where there's like, well, if there's not a negative story about Joe Biden, then we can't run a negative story about Donald Trump. That's the tragedy of the way the mainstream template works.
Well, here's how they report it. Okay, tonight, Donald Trump, former employee, says he loaded boxes of documents onto a plane to New Jersey while the FBI was looking for these documents, and those documents have never been found. And he also said that he shared nuclear secrets with an Australian billionaire. And by the way, Joe Biden had documents in his garage too. That's what they do. There's no comparison between the two things.
Yeah. Listen, we have to take a quick pause, but I want to come back and I want to show this clip of Donald Trump not knowing who his own grandson was when he showed up at the UFC event. And a whole lot more here on Uncovered next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I personally have felt the benefits of therapy for many years now. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's all done online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/uncovered today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/uncovered. And you can find links to our sponsor down in the description. Ron, this weird moment with Donald Trump showing up at this event and bypassing his own grandson, I tweeted it and thousands of people kind of left comments about it. This is an example of where his mind is at in terms of the only people he's really interested in are the people that he can do business with, get funding from, or are going to, sing his praises. But, who'd want to be Donald Trump's grandson? It's got to be the worst job in the history of family.
Yeah, there were two people there that Donald Trump was concerned about ingratiating him, impressing, etc., that he wants their support. Joe Rogan was one. Joe Rogan has not yet endorsed Trump, and he's always kind of stayed out of politics, but Joe Rogan has a huge audience of people that are probably not very super political all the time, that watch his show for other things. And Trump wants that Joe Rogan endorsement, and Rogan was right there. And the other guy was the Barstool Sports guy who you see in this clip. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Dave, I think, is his first name. But, another big organization, website, etc., YouTube stuff that deals with male sports fans and who are generally not very political. And he's not that political. So he's looking to tap into him too, trying to get his support. And he's a guy who's never sided politically, taken sides one way or the other. But while Trump is trying to, glad hand them, Ivanka is trying to say, here's your grandson. And you see that Trump didn't even look at him. He didn't even acknowledge him, didn't even notice him. And what the other part is, you can see that the kid was very upset. You could see he was down. He was really, this was his big moment. He was ringside. I'm going to say hi to my grandfather, the former president. And so when he blew the kid off, you could see the kid dejected. And for a brief second, you see the Trump family has to have this fake reaction all the time. We've seen it with Melania. You see it with Ivanka. You see her when the cameras are on her, she smiles, and then she turns away and she gets a mean look on her face over what her dad just did to her son.
Here it is. Poor kid.
You see her big smile with the cameras, and then she turns and gets a completely different look.
Real face.
This is how fake these people are. Dave Portnoy is the guy from Barstool Sports.
That's right. Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about you posted this image of Aaron Rodgers saying that UFOs might be getting shot down to divert the country's attention away from the release of Jeffrey Epstein's client list. And then we're hearing that Aaron Rodgers might be a pick for RFK Jr. as a running mate. Is that right?
Yeah, this is really funny. I mean, I posted the picture of RFK with Aaron Rodgers a couple weeks ago that RFK put it out and said, hey, I've been hanging out a lot with Aaron. We've been talking a lot. We get along great. I thought, well, that's just perfect because they're very much alike. They're both just crazy, nutty conspiracy theorists that are, tend to lean right these days. RFK for sure, Aaron Rodgers for sure. And, for them two to find each other, it's just poetic. So then the New York Times does an interview of RFK yesterday where they were asking him about his choice of running mates. And he gives his short list, which has a handful of names on it. Jesse Ventura, Tulsi Gabbard, who said she was asked by him and wants nothing to do with him. Jesse Ventura, of course, is another conspiracy theorist, former governor of Minnesota, independent. And there was one other name in there. Oh, Rand Paul was another one.
That's right.
Paul also said he's not interested. But so, the two names on his short list are Jesse Ventura and Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is supposed to start training camp here in August for the New York Jets. And he missed last season with an Achilles tear after signing a big contract. So I'm not so sure the New York Jets are very thrilled to hear this news that he's flirting with RFK Jr. about running for president when he's supposed to be getting ready for the season.
Okay, well, I'm going to play a clip of this banal conversation. I presume this is on their podcast. And I mean, to hear, bros if this is what bros get, you and I we've got a certain bromance going, but I would like to think that the quality of our conversation is a little more advanced compared to what these creatures are up to. Here it is.
Especially Navy pilots, I believe, with unidentified flying objects. So this is not surprising. Obviously, there was some sort of Chinese spy balloon that was up in the air, lasers, allegedly. And there's been a few other objects that have been shot down. I believe that this has been going on for a long time. Interesting timing on everything. There's a lot of other things going on in the world.
What?
Like what?
Well, you're saying you're saying, oh, looky here. Is that what you just said? Bang. That's what you said?
Could be some of that, yeah.
No, that doesn't happen.
No, of course not.
Did you hear about Ohio, bro? Did you hear about Ohio, East Palestine?
What's going on now?
Dude.
They blew up that? the thing and the fishing over there? Right?
Yeah. Yep, sounds like you know. Yeah, sounds like you've read up on it. Yeah, I don't know what blew up, how it blew up. It was on fire for I guess like 20 melees before it ended up derailing and go. There's some wild shit going on right now, Aaron.
Did you hear about the Epstein client list about to be released too?
Whoa, allegedly, yeah. I assume we have to say because I'm getting sued by a guy that used to be a starting quarterback in which you were a backup quarterback. But what's that? What are you talking about?
There's some files that have some names on it that might be getting released pretty soon.
It's like an infomercial for lobotomies.
This is that's
remarkable.
Well, Aaron Rodgers. This is Aaron Rodgers' theory was that what he's saying there, and they always kind of beat around the bush. Yeah. What he's saying there is that that Chinese spy balloon thing was done intentionally by the deep state to divert attention away from the release of the Epstein client list.
Yeah.
That's a perfect RFK Jr. running mate, right? If I've ever seen one.
Charlie Kirk's been freaking out that Donald Trump's going to lose votes to RFK Jr. after Trump claimed credit for the COVID vaccine again, and the COVID vaccine's been a bit of a bone of contention for Donald Trump and his supporters because he wants to take credit for being the president that did Operation Warp Speed and all this stuff and getting it out fast. He didn't actually get it out under his presidency. It came out during Biden's presidency, but he wants to take credit for the development. And because it was, one of very few things that he can celebrate, I guess, from his presidency. And of course, his fans are all, plenty of them, anti-vaxxers and don't like it. And Charlie Kirk is certainly one of them, isn't he? Let's have a quick listen to him.
And RFK is building a coalition of center-right moms that the Trump campaign needs to do a better job of communicating to. And Donald Trump taking credit for the vaccine, if RFK wasn't in the race, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you have to understand that there are millions of voters that look at the vaccine issue as a highly personal issue, that they will not vote for a candidate, they will not support a candidate, and you might say, oh, they're going to vote for us anyway. That is the typical response. And with RFK on the ballot, you cannot dismiss this coalition.
There we go. That's how he's playing it. I mean, this is obviously it's not great for Trump, but is this just a distraction, or is this actually genuinely going to be an issue for voters?
It's generally going to be an issue if he does it again. And right. Alex Jones did the same thing. He went nuclear. He went crazy when Trump did this because. Yes, I mean we've talked about this before. Is that when Trump first started redoing his rallies again after he slunked away from the White House with his tail between his legs back in early 2022, he continued to mention the vaccine because yes, like you said, he wants credit for what he says is he wants the credit for saving hundreds of millions of lives because of Operation Warp Speed. This is his line. And he got booed 2 or 3 times in a row at Trump rallies by his own supporters. So he abandoned it, stopped talking about the vaccine, hasn't brought up the vaccine in probably a year and a half, hasn't even mentioned it. And, the right-wing interviewers are kind enough not to ask him about it because they should ask him about it because he can't help himself and it hurts him with his own supporters. So when Joe Biden said, what a mess he inherited from Trump in the State of the Union address and how they hadn't even had the vaccines yet, et cetera, Trump absolutely couldn't help himself. Yeah. And even though he's been told by all of his advisors, do not talk about the vaccine, he's rage tweeting, live tweeting during the speech. And he says, I did the vaccine. I should get credit for the vaccine. I'm the one who did this. And what happened is the right wingers went absolutely nuts. They were pissed all across social media. Trump, why are you saying this? Why are you doing this? And, Alex Jones went crazy. Alex Jones says, if he does this one more time, I'm out. Yeah. And so what Charlie Kirk is saying here, first of all, he's 90% right. As usual, Kirk is not correct about one part. He says that this is a problem for center-right suburban moms. No, it is not. This is a problem for him with the far-right kooks, who this is their number one issue. This is the most important issue to them by far. This is not anti-vaxxers in mom suburbia. So a lot of these people are voting for RFK and not Trump because of this issue. And so what he's worried, that's why he says, if RFK wasn't in the race, this wouldn't be a big deal. That's why, because RFK jumped all over this too. As soon as Trump made that post, RFK was all over it. He says, see, I told you, this is Trump bragging about the vaccine again. So he knows that he's getting his votes from these anti-vaxxers. So if he continues to do this, and I think Biden should continue to bait him, and Democrats should continue to bait him to brag about the vaccine, because it is going to drive some of his voters RFK.
Yeah. Do you think Donald Trump knows what a dictatorship is, or authoritarianism is? Because he invited Viktor Orbán of Hungary to a meeting and celebrated him and said there's no one that's better, smarter, or a better leader than Viktor Orbán. He said this is the way it's going to be, and that's the end of it. He's the boss. So he's describing an authoritarian, and it didn't seem to kind of connect with the criticism of Donald Trump being a future or indeed a past dictator, authoritarian, autocrat himself. And so I just find it very interesting getting into the psyche of Donald Trump, he's one of the dumbest people in the country, right? And, you know, what you've just described about him forgetting what was said about the vaccines and can't help himself is just proof of that. But, you know, I just cannot understand that correlation between the fact that maybe he sees dictatorship as a positive and not as a negative, something he wants to hang his hat on. But does he recognize that Viktor Orbán and the way Hungary is operating is perilously unsafe for its citizens and for human rights and for freedoms?
Oh, I think he understands it, and I think he wants the U.S. to be the same way. You know, jailing journalists for social media posts, et cetera, et cetera. Viktor Orbán went to Mar-a-Lago for one reason. He was sent as Vladimir Putin's emissary to have relay a message to Trump, to hear what Trump had to say in return. And he went back, and here's what, aside from those comments, okay, aside from the comments of Trump envying the fact that Orbán, what he says is the law and that's it, that's what got the most attention.
Yeah.
But what happened? Orbán left Mar-a-Lago, went back to Hungary, gave an interview, and was asked, what did you and Trump talk about? And he said, what we talked about was Ukraine. And he said that Trump assured me that on his first day in office, not one penny of aid will go to Ukraine. And that, he said, that is how he is going to end the war. He's going to end the war by cutting off aid to Ukraine. So he told Viktor Orbán that. Now, Trump has hinted at that, but he has not said that publicly. His junior has said it, and Trump has hinted at it, but he hasn't come out and said it as blatantly as Viktor Orbán said it after his meeting with Trump. So this is exactly what Putin wanted to hear. How do we know that? Because it was blown up on Russian television. Russian television made a big deal out of this. They were celebrating. They said, look, all we got to do is hold on until January when Trump is back, and we've won the war. And they may be right.
It's too sad, really, that America has fallen into this indirect relationship with the Kremlin, where they've infiltrated US politics with Donald Trump. They can send in, because, you know, Hungary is a NATO country, right? So it shouldn't be doing the Kremlin's bidding, but it is. And the problem here is men, you know, these terrible, terrible men. Here's a clip of Donald Trump celebrating the autocrat Viktor Orbán.
There's nobody that's better, smarter, or a better leader than Viktor Orbán. He's fantastic. He's as you know, the Prime Minister of Hungary. and does a great job. He's a non-controversial figure because he said this is the way it's going to be, and that's the end of it, right? He's the boss. And you know, he's a great leader, fantastic leader in Europe and all over the world.
And he does that weird change of gear, doesn't he, where he says the controversial thing and, he's the boss. And then he goes, no, but seriously, he's,
Yeah.
And he does that a lot.
Kidding. Yeah.
But he's not kidding, is he?
No, he's not kidding. So a couple more things about that too, is what Russian media said was, they said, well, the good thing is we know if Trump is back, we're going to win the war in Ukraine because he's going to cut them off. They said, but the good thing is, even though he's not president, he wouldn't be president for another 8 months. We've got Mike Johnson and and Donald Trump's party is helping us out right now. So even though Trump is not president yet, he's telling his party what to do and they're blocking the aid. So they said that on Russian television.
Mike Johnson, I mean, I referred to him as a Trojan horse last week, I think. And this is the reality. In fact, a group of congressional Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi today, and some veterans, and they urged Johnson to, I think the quote was, lead, follow, or get out of the way of more military support for Ukraine. I mean, this is so blatant, isn't it? That Mike Johnson has a direct line with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is telling him exactly what to do. It reminds me of like keyhole surgery. The surgeon's in the other room operating the computer, and the robot is in the operating theater actually, doing the work. That's all Mike Johnson is. He's just a kind of proxy robot.
Yeah, and here's the problem. I think we're up to 6 House Republicans now who are ready to vote for the discharge petition to override the speaker and force a vote. Here's the problem, is that you got probably an equal number of Democrats who oppose the aid package because it includes aid to Israel. So you got these handful of Republicans that are willing to go against their leadership. But the problem is the votes might not be there because of a handful of Democrats who oppose it because of Israel. So I don't know how this is going to play out. Here's the thing. Biden he's got a little pool of about $4 billion that from our defense budget that he's drawing from. It's a little bit of surplus money that he's using to send them stuff. But that's about to run out pretty soon, probably in about a month or two. So this has got to get done or Ukraine is screwed.
It's so sad.
I mean, but that's also why Macron and some of the EU leaders have said we've got to step up because we can't count on the US, which is sad.
And they're not just stepping up. I mean, Macron said in a speech the other week, didn't he? I think we ended our show with it last week, where he said we cannot rely on the US anymore. The threat of Donald Trump, or he was referring to the electorate, actually, wasn't he? He said, we can't leave our fates to the voters. And that is basically saying we cannot do business with Donald Trump. I mean, the fact that this whole story is playing out in front of our eyes, and if we rewind to 2016, where, Trump was denying any connection with Russia, collusion or otherwise, and, created the phrase Russia, 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 and it's turned out to actually be Russia, Russia, Russia. That's how it should be said, because that's who's behind all of this.
And it also makes all these stolen classified documents even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the infiltration of the RNC for a moment, because that kind of follows
more positive,
on.
More positive news.
More positive news. Well, interestingly, we were, you would naturally, as I did on Twitter, criticize the fact that the Trump family has now infiltrated the Republican National Committee by installing Lara Trump as the co-chair. And obviously everyone's saying, well, they're just going to spend all the money on Trump's legal fees and there'll be nothing left for candidates. But then some Democrats are coming out and saying, yeah, that's good. Let them do that. They'll have no money to then promote candidates in these swing states. Do you have that same view?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to help Democrats for sure, what they're doing. I mean, you put in Chris LaCivita, who's, install him in there, who's connected to the Trump campaign. You got Laura Trump in there. What do? They fired 60 staffers, longtime staffers
on the first day.
Yeah, the first day. They're definitely going to replace these with a bunch of Trump grifters and hacks and sycophants,
loyalists. It's like similar to what they're talking about with Project 2025, right? Get rid of the administrative state and install Trump loyalists. This is what's happening at the RNC, including the arrival of Christina Bobb, one of Trump's lawyers.
Yeah, Ronna McDaniel was about to institute a huge minority voter outreach program. They got rid of that. That was another thing that they did. And yes, they brought in Christina Bobb, and I have a theory about why, but they brought her in to be their election integrity, be in charge of that, which she is like one of the biggest elections. She's like Jenna Ellis. She's used to be, or Sidney Powell. That's who she is. She's a way out there wacky. I posted a bunch of old clips of her election conspiracies to have her legitimized into the RNC. And I can tell you why. I think because Trump hired her back in the day away from OAN. She was an OAN broadcaster.
Yeah.
To handle some of his Arizona stuff and some of these election fraud stuff as an attorney, as one of his attorneys. But she's just completely grossly incompetent, lost everything. And I think, she's still been on Trump's payroll and she's pretty much useless. And I think what he's been trying to do is find a place to offload her, to get rid of her, because she's completely useless. And she was the one who was there, by the way, when the FBI executed the search warrant as well and screwed that whole thing up. So I think this is like him just offloading her. Yeah, let's put her over on the RNC payroll so I don't have to pay her anymore.
We have a clip of her on some obscure right-wing news channel talking about this, but she's still talking, or she has a new plan now to get the election of 2020 overturned yet again.
This was in 2022, this clip. So this clip is in 2022, but she's saying that she's just figured out a plan to reinstate Trump as president in 2022.
I mean, you said she's like an election denier. I love the fact, because Peter Navarro did this as well, just going on camera and exposing the grift, just kind of explaining how it is they're going to do it when it's just plainly illegal. Here she is.
Evidence that Joe Biden side cheated. So they could withdraw their electors, or they could actually decide to award Trump electors, although I would anticipate they would probably just withdraw the electors. And if that happens from 3 different states, 3 different resolutions go into Congress, and I'm sorry, I'm summarizing this.
Right.
It's a complicated issue, but it would have to go into the U.S. Congress to decide whether they want to accept the resolutions, whether they want to act on them or not. So it's a complex issue that needs to be handled complexly by different state legislatures and the U.S. Congress. And I actually think that it's designed well, because you don't want this to be something that you can quickly, easily overturn elections. It needs to be something that you need many, many elected officials to take action on. You have to have the majority of, in this situation, the majority of 3 different legislatures say, oh, you know what, we got it wrong, then Congress. So it's a complex issue. I don't know that this Congress would take action on it. However, after 22, if we replace them, there might be. Who knows?
Like you said, it's never been done before, but that's why this primary coming up in November is so, the midterms rather, is so important. Yeah. It's important that we get it right, and we try to call out.
Yeah, well, they didn't get it right, and in fact, they had to resort to cheating to try and pull it off. I mean, very few of Trump's candidates, those that he endorsed, actually won their seats.
I mean, she's saying right there, if Republicans take over the House, they can install Trump as president in 2023. Yeah. This is what she just said. This is who they put in charge of a general counsel for elections at the RNC. I mean, it's just absolutely, and she's bonkers. She's crazy. Yeah. And by the way, she's there with Marjorie Taylor Greene's new boyfriend, Brian, who was in that clip happily married with children, in theory, at that time. So was Marjorie Taylor Greene. So a lot has happened since that clip.
This kind of just goes to support this idea of my suggestion of this Republican House of Cards collapsing. Because if the RNC is going to implode because of people like Christina Bobb and Lara Trump, and then, of course, the traditional GOP is imploding. Mitch McConnell standing down. We don't yet know who's going to replace him. But as Biden says, it's not your grandfather or your father's conservative party anymore. We're really seeing the total collapse of the institution of the traditional right wing as we know it. And yet, when Trump has been trying to win these primaries, of course he's winning them because he's the only blinking candidate, but he's only getting 50, 60, 70% of the vote from Republicans, which proves that he is not as popular as he needs to be to win a general election.
And here's the thing. We talk about all this all the time, which is true, that there's these low information Republican, the voters, both parties have them, who aren't political junkies, who aren't on social media, and they pay attention to elections typically 60 to 90 days out. They check back in every 2 years, and they look at the candidates and they see what's going on. And those people don't really know what's happening here with the RNC, with Christina Bobb, with all this craziness, all these people leaving the house. And when they do check back in, in September, they're going to see mania. And they're going to find out that the Republican Party that they've belonged to and they thought that they knew is gone. Yeah. And how do we know it's gone? Because Trump is saying it's dead. Trump Jr. is saying it. They're all saying it's dead, the leaders. They're saying the old Republican Party is gone. The conservative movement is dead. It's now America First and MAGA. And I think a lot of these people who are just doctors and lawyers and accountants who aren't on social media, when they find this out, because they're not fully aware of it yet, are going to be pretty shocked.
Didn't Trump say yesterday or the day before that if you're not for the MAGA movement, then you're not welcome in the Republican Party? Didn't he make some kind of reference to that?
He did. They did say that we don't want these people anymore. He said that we don't want the Mitt Romneys, as John McCain Republicans anymore. He said we don't need them. Our base is big enough that we don't even need them anymore. We don't need their votes. That's what he said. So it just shows you what a moron he is. He's so dumb.
He's going to get a nasty surprise. I mean, my only fear, because the more we analyze it, the more obvious it is to me that Trump is going to lose his own election. The stuff that he's doing is so naive to know what the public at large actually want in it for a country, that he's really misjudged it. And I think that he stands a good chance of losing significantly. However, my fear is that then we get into that whole cycle of it was fraud, it was rigged, the election was this, the election was that, and that annoyance doesn't go away, because this guy is not going to go quietly.
He's going to start saying that all throughout the summer and the fall. They're cheating, it's rigged, they're going to steal this.
Yeah.
And I think that when people check back in, and they hear that madness, these moderate Republican voters, they're going to be a little bit taken aback, because they're going to say, look, we just went through this with January 6th. We kind of were willing to give him another shot and say, that was a huge mistake in judgment, and he'll learn. Maybe he's learned from it. And what they're going to hear when they check back in is he's far worse now than he was then.
People are wiser now to his rhetoric, because it's been proven that the election wasn't stolen and it wasn't rigged. And so to use that language, it's only going to make people realize that he's lying for a second, or if the New York Times is counting, a 30,00001th time. Or was it the Washington Post that did that count? I forget.
Yeah,
okay.
Washington Post.
It was the Washington Post. I want to finish with Juan Orlando Hernandez. And this is a very important story and something that hasn't really got any coverage. Just tell us about, this is the Honduran president. Tell us about him.
This has not gotten the coverage it should be getting, because this is a really big deal. Okay. So this was the president of Honduras when Trump was president. And the Trump administration and his DHS secretary praised this man, praised him for two reasons. Because number one, he was supposedly helping us interdict drugs coming up from South America through Central America. He was supposedly helping us stop that pipeline. What we know now about that is that he was doing the exact opposite. That the guy that the Trump administration got in bed with was actually facilitating one of the largest drug trafficking operations in history. So he was playing us. He was playing the Trump administration. So why did we do this? Why did we get in bed with this guy? I will tell you why. And this is the part that has not gotten the coverage, is because he agreed to bottleneck migrants. He agreed to stop migrants coming up through Honduras to get to the United States from South America and to keep them in Honduras during Trump's election year. Okay. That's another reason why not only was it COVID, but it was that guy right there that had bottlenecked a lot of migrants in Central America because Trump was letting him traffic drugs and looking the other way and praising him and legitimizing him because this guy was helping stop migrants when Trump was up for re-election.
Meanwhile,
That's
Trump,
what was going on here.
Meanwhile, Trump uses the phrase, they're bringing drugs, they're murderers, they're rapists, and actually he was facilitating this the whole time. And
what happened when Trump lost this election? This guy let all the migrants go, and they all came here. So, yes, I mean, it just goes to show you how rotten to the core Donald Trump is, and he will get in bed with any gangster, any criminal. He doesn't care about the United States. He doesn't care about drugs. He cares about Donald Trump.
Okay, well, we have to leave it there, but it's really a very kind of somber note to end on, isn't it? That, you know, to know that Donald Trump really is this kind of mafia criminal that, you know, we've learned, you know, we're learning so much about him, but he really is. The more of these types of stories that come out, Ron, again, it just doubles down on who he really is. And if we think of that clip of him ignoring his grandson,
and how much coverage did that get? Everybody watching this, how many of you have heard that story from media? It's a true story. Read it. It's in The Guardian. It's in that story.
You heard it here, and you're only going to get the facts here on Uncovered and potentially nowhere else. Maybe The Guardian, which I do recommend a subscription to as well.
They're good.
Okay, Ron, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again next Wednesday at the same time. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. We shall return. You can download the audio podcast tonight. And if you want to catch this show again and share it, then just rewind as soon as we've finished. Thank you, Ron.
Okay, see you next week.